Welcome to another live stream. We're going to talk about the tyranny of organized harassment. Individuals who experience gang stalking, organized harassment, group harassment, narcissist abuse, scapegoating in their community, maybe even government experiments, understand the tyranny of their environmental subjection. The landscape of an individual who is experiencing the tyranny of organized harassment involves everything from sabotage, rumors, disinformation, labeling. People are covertly attacking them and plotting against them and using a technique involving plausible deniability to obfuscate the reality of what is going on in an attempt to discredit them, to throw them into a labyrinth of manipulation where they are painted as either deviants of society or mentally ill. And I've referenced this before that when you get into the sequelae of gang stalking, it fits perfectly within the DSM of psychiatry of persecutory delusion or delusion of grandeur or psychosis, schizophrenia, manufactured schizophrenia. And that's one of the things that makes it very difficult for the target individual community to gain credibility, because individuals who are experiencing this have a huge dilemma, and that dilemma is why? Why are these people doing these things to you? And why do you think you're so special? Of course, that's the accusation that comes out of the tyranny of this is, why would anybody care about you? What makes you a target? And of course, that can be many different things. We've talked about that before. We've talked about individuals who are literally the scapegoat, maybe of a social circle, maybe of a community, maybe even their family. And that is a type of glue. It is a mechanism by which individuals will literally commune together and bond in their activity of persecuting the individual or the victim surrounding a type of social structure or social dynamic involving different norms and other things involving coercion and maybe even things that have to do with philosophy. I've talked about the secret societies before. I've talked about the fraternities that are out there. A lot of targeted individuals will focus in on maybe the Illuminati or the Freemasons or whatever. And those things are real. But of course, the conformity comes with benefits, and defecting from those things, that comes with a penalty, right? If you're not going to agree or conform to the group, whatever it is, social group, fraternity, whatever kind of dynamic that is involved in your scenario, there's going to be a pushback. There is going to be persecution, right? And that's just on one level. You take it into the higher levels of individuals who have speculated that they are being experimented on, by literally government agencies or, private investigating firms and so on and so forth, involved in different types of experiments to silence whistleblowers and to gain conformity with plausible deniability, to obfuscate, soft kill someone, to obfuscate the illegal activity and frame someone as a type of deviant or a mentally ill individual, right? We don't know, what happened to them. We don't know what they were doing. And it's even more convenient when they're discrediting targeted individuals to throw disinformation out there and even get them into a place where they can use that plausible deniability. I've mentioned that several times. There are things that targets must remember if they're going to survive this. If you think you're a target, an individual, there are things you can't do anymore. You cannot just throw everything out there for everyone to know. You have to use disinformation. You have to be very careful. You have to play a game where you're not reacting through your environment. That's part of the sensitization that targeted individuals deal with. That's part of the mechanism, right? If they see you reacting or you play along with the part in the scientific modus operandi of group harassment, where they get you paranoid, they attack you with certain things, and then they just sit back and wait for you to turn into your own worst enemy. They get to the place where targets are looking for things within their landscape, not realizing the science that is around this whole thing, to get them processing information differently and looking crazy, or maybe even drugged out or something like that. Because, of course, there's a lot of things involved in group harassment. You have noise campaigns, you have all kinds of different things. People talk about getting attacked demonically. They are getting attacked with directed energy weapons. They are getting covertly poisoned. They are getting sabotaged in their family or in their workplace. They're experiencing all kinds of different environmental stressors, and their devices seem to be hacked, and so on and so forth. And at the point, well, excuse me, let's go in here, and before I go on with this, let's see if everything's okay. Let's look like anyone is complaining. We don't really have that many people in here, but David Dotson, welcome, Lord. Lord, be lamp under my feet. Welcome to the live stream. For Thal, welcome to the live stream. We're going to get a couple people in here. And I haven't been doing as many live streams as I usually do. I've been very busy. I'd like to thank everybody who helped support me in the channel. Things have been pretty rough. But getting back to the methodology and the scientific equation of this harassment, in that individuals are processing information in a different way. And I've mentioned before, and if people are getting irritated because I repeat myself, I apologize. But it is very important that targeted individuals out there who are going to run across this. I think this channel's probably been shadow banned. I've had a lot of individuals say they can't find my channel, or they can't believe they haven't seen me. I've been out there for 5 years, so on and so forth. I don't know. But we have another individual out there who has a channel. Supposedly the government is promoting them and, gave them 3,000-4,000 viewers or whatever. I'm not going to mention who that is. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But that's the views are pretty much the same as this channel, and they got like 6,000 people. But the thing is that that's not happening with this channel. And if individuals are finding this, and they're coming across these videos where individuals are experiencing a very consistent theme in their harassment, where they believe they're targeted individuals or believe they're experiencing group or organized harassment, you must know that they are trying to program you or even reprogram you. Okay. Because, and I've mentioned before, when it comes to the sensitization, I've talked about the fact that an individual, maybe you had a friend, or maybe you or someone else buys a particular type of car. Okay. Whatever, a red Ford, whatever it is, you wouldn't have noticed it before. Why? Because it wasn't in your salient landscape. It was not part of your conscious awareness like it is now. And a lot of people will experience that. Will say, my gosh, everybody seems to be buying that vehicle now. I can't believe it. I see them everywhere. They're very popular. You wouldn't have noticed it before. It was basically camouflaged in with the environment, with no particular, triggers or anything like that along with it that would make you notice it, right? You're not looking for it. And a lot of targets have talked about that. I used to talk to a guy at Washington that said that, when he started to experience the gang stalking, it just ramps up. It gets very intense. People seem to be following you around. You get directed conversations. Things are happening to you. It's very personal. And then you start looking around to see, what people are doing, but they're looking at you or whatever. And then, it's pretty much over at that point. But they will get you to that place with a very aggressive style of stalking, right? In other words, you wouldn't have noticed it before. The red Ford, whatever, would have just been part of the environment, and it would have been another vehicle, no color, trigger, no particular model type, nothing. And gang stalking is similar, whether it's themes or different words or maybe even sign language, or other things that targets will talk about, different behaviors. None of those things were part of your landscape. And unfortunately, the theme-based methodology in gang stalking means that it is a type of method to attack people in mass and get them to take it in a personal way, as if they're in a matrix, or as if they were in some kind of horror movie or purgatory or something, to where all these things are just being done to them. They turn on the TV, they turn on the radio, they go, to the grocery store, wherever they go. It seems to be very consistent, almost like all these people are getting together behind the scenes and talking about you. Maybe people have speculated that they're communicating on their phones. Of course, nowadays, everybody's looking at their phone, right? It's really not that big a deal now. But of course, now that you're a targeted individual and you're being harassed, but everybody that's on a phone is that they must being alerted to my presence. That's how they know. They're communicating with these people. They're sending out messages about me. Well, I've seen these things happen long before, people had phones or anything, like way back before the internet was even really connected that intensely. And in those cases, I've talked about the spiritual connection. In my opinion, you're dealing with something that's literally like a hive mind. And now that we have the advent of technology, it just boosts it up to the point where that can be used against a target. Like I said, a lot of targets will deal with the whole thing of where their devices are being hacked. I mean, what better way to monitor people? That's why they did it. You're basically carrying around, it's like those people that they get arrested or they get on probation, they got to wear the ankle bracelet. You're basically just carrying around your phone willingly. It's a type of ankle bracelet. I mean, they're watching everything you do, or possibly. I mean, it's not that hard to do. They're watching your geographical travel. They're watching your habits, the things that you look at, whatever, the things that you buy. They're compiling all these little data points together. It can be done. Private investigating firms will do that. Sometimes they become involved in this whole thing. They get contracted out. Sometimes it's just, basically a way to sensitize an individual and then just gaslight them into either believing that they're nuts, or everybody else believes they are, or just that, it's something that it's not. And I've talked about that before, that you have the disinformation out there. Sometimes individuals believe the government's after them. They're hearing voices or whatever, but it might not necessarily be technology from a foreign power or the United States. It might literally be a spiritual issue. You don't know that, though. I mean, you have to be very careful how you break it down. It really doesn't matter, because the protocol that you have to employ, which is a non-reactive type of modus operandi, where you are paying attention to things that are exaggerated only. You're not reading into it. You're not listening to people's conversations. You're not looking for one headlight of vehicles. You're not looking for color combinations. You're not trying to find this stuff anywhere. And to a fault, you are ignoring things, and you are actually putting disinformation out there, maybe even in social circles, rather than telling people that you are some kind of weird, target or something, that you're experiencing this type of strange environmental tyranny. You don't say anything, because the individuals who are infiltrating your life, and sometimes you deal with an infiltrator, they're gonna want to get that info. It's almost like recon. Oh, really? How are you doing? Things been okay with you? Oh, really? Nothing strange going on, is there? You'd tell me, wouldn't you? I had people like that when I was dealing with it. I was like, what are you talking about? Why would you ask me something like, I don't know. I just wondered if anything was weird going on. You can always ask me for help. I wasn't displaying any strange symptoms. I wasn't obviously paranoid or anything else. And then you find out some of these people who are surrounding you are literally just, playing this game with you. And there's someone who, you thought they were your friend or, whatever, but really they're not. It's like either they've been hijacked or they've been literally getting paid or something like that to mess with you. And you don't know. It's like a spiritual hit. Sometimes, and I've talked about that before, that these individuals will encircle the target and get in their life, and then all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. And then they're there to kind of gaslight you and drive you nuts. It's really weird. All this stuff happens that way. Let me go back into the comments here. It looks like we have a few more people that have joined the live stream. Ernie, welcome to the live stream. We couldn't have one without Ernie. Bora Bora, welcome to the live stream. David Dotson, welcome to the live stream. Doug, welcome. And Ernie says, I finally told my sister I'm sick of her toxic behavior. We're going to modify that a little bit for the audio. After being abused and gaslighted for years. And that's one of the things that is a huge dilemma for targeted individuals, because you can't be someone's doormat, but at the same time you got to try to be clever, because what they'll do is they want you to confront them, and they'll ramp up the tyranny, or they'll just compile all these little, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I just wanted to help you. It's like, really, you've apologized to me 3 times in an hour. Just get the hell away from me. If I have to get one apology from someone a week, they're done. Just get out. Just go somewhere else, man. You're killing me, But these people, I just want to help you or whatever. But the toxic environment, the complaining, the projection, the constant little games, and so on and so forth, and they're just waiting for you to say something. Oh, I can't believe you would accuse me of that. Or, even better, to get the target at a place where they're needy or something, and you're living with family or whatever you're getting. But, then there's nothing you can do because the elephant is in the middle of the room. You say something, you're biting the hand that feeds you. They love that. They get leverage for a target. It's like the narcissist abuse spouse from hell. We'll go live under a bridge then if you don't like it. You just want my money or whatever. But what they did was they took that individual in a place of dysfunction and told them everything was going to be okay and that they would take care of them. And then after, years of whatever, when they have no money or no leverage, however you want to look at that, then they'll start abusing them. And they'll start, well, you're just using me, but they'll make sure they're needy. Right. And that's what's gaslighting. And they'll just feed on that individual because it doesn't matter anything. They can abuse them. They have limited that individual's scope in their social circle, in their, in their career sometimes, usually, especially when it comes to family situations where, a woman classically is, someone who takes care of the kids and, whatever. And of course, they have different things that happen after, giving birth to children. They might not look the same. They might have, a different appearance health-wise. And this whole thing is based on a communion between that, man and woman to raise the family and to be honest and communicate with each other and create a healthy environment. But it's just nothing more than a trap. Sometimes women will even do that too. They'll sucker the guy into something or whatever, and then they'll try to get pregnant and manipulate them or whatever. And they might even just, start garnishing their money or whatever. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's the man who does it and then makes them dependent. But the point is they get you in a place where you can't do anything. They get you in a place where you can't fight back, and you have to just play along with this surreal environment. Oh, everything's okay. Oh, don't worry about all that weird stuff you're doing. Really? You know, we're beyond that, aren't we? Of course we are. Right. But they, gaslighting is real fun to watch sometimes how people do that kind of stuff. And the abuse that comes out of not only the narcissists and some of the environmental tyranny that goes into that, but with a targeted individual, of course, they're subjected to an environment which makes them very needy, right? They don't have a whole lot of leverage at all. Sometimes targets will end up homeless or, in a type of financial destitution or even disillusionment because they don't realize what's happening, right? It's a psychological nightmare. And, typically when targets, experience this whole thing, of course, it's a complete flip on their conceptual framework. And I've mentioned that before. You eventually experience a type of egoic death because you're basically derailed or dysregulated to the point where you have to recapitulate everything. You have to reframe your reality. It's not the same. The new normal is you being stalked and harassed, people conspiring against you, people, in your family, in your social circle, at your workplace, or whatever. You're getting break-ins, all these things. It's completely different. So while you're trying to pick up the pieces, your brain is thrown into survival mode, which they hijack your survival mechanisms to dysregulate you and put you into a state of anxiety, right? To then control you emotionally. And then they'll accuse you of being nuts, right? You're overreacting. You're paranoid. You're living in fear. What's the matter? Why do you think all these people are after you? And then, of course, you're just, the focal point of your own persecutory delusion and self-centered menagerie of psychosis. And of course, that's only if you talk about it, though. Like I said, you have to be very careful when doing that. And it's important to remember. Hold on a minute. I got a little bit of activity that. Okay, nothing major. I'm just looking on my security camera. It's important to remember the framework of this whole thing, the tyranny of your environment, the sensitization and deprivation to make you needy. And of course, that's of course social, economic, the environment, so on and so forth. A lot of targets will deal with the whole issue of having maybe a boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, or, the rug being ripped out from underneath them as they have formulated the vector of their life in the sense that they have goals and aspirations. And of course, they're just going to come in and smash the sandcastle down. They will try to label you and gaslight you and move you into propositional tyranny and get you to process information differently, reframing your reality and reprogramming your mind, infiltrating your life, surrounding you with that type of tyranny, and sabotaging you to the point of dysfunction. And individuals who are veterans that have dealt with this stuff for years, maybe even decades, or maybe even their whole life, know what I'm talking about. Because, I've mentioned before, it's very easy to underestimate this whole thing. And people just want to they're playing with your head. They just want to get in your head. Well, they already are in your head. And now, exponentially, you're experiencing that environmental tyranny, and you never thought even was there. How is this even possible? And targets will leave, and I've talked about that before. They might run and try to move, and then they'll leave the city or they'll leave the state or whatever. And there's no getting away from the classic target environmental tyranny because there's more going on. It's not just a group of people who have come against you in a geographical area to use you like a scapegoat. It's something that is literally in the spiritual dimension, or maybe even something that is being paid for by a government program or something like that. I'm going to get into the comments here and see what's going on out here. Oh, welcome, Mrs. Madsen Miles. Welcome to live stream. And Bora Bora says she didn't like her sister either. Oh, that's horrible. You guys are horrible. I'm just kidding. Okay. And Doug R. I'm going to see if I can put him up here. Says, no friends, no family, no trust. I think I've got it right. And I think you're on stage now. And we'll put that down. I don't know if that showed up or not. Sorry if it didn't. Oh, we have a moderator, Nicholas Boserman. Okay. Okay, well, it looks like there might be somebody in here that I'm not aware of. Nicholas says, show's going good. I'm driving around, impossible to moderate. Oh, okay, so you're out cruising. Right on. Hope everything is good. And glad to see you're out living and trying to enjoy yourself. Nicholas is very impressive because this guy was attacked to the point where he's been physically debilitated. And I'm not going to go into how that happened, but and I'll leave that up to him if he wants to talk about that in the comments. But he is now in a wheelchair with paraplegia. Very active, though. Very active individual. And I actually communicate with him quite a bit. And the thing that I like about Nicholas is that rather than complaining, rather than being negative about what's going on, this guy is very positive, and he is never toxic. Never toxic. He's real. He's honest, and sometimes he's got to talk about things, and we all do. But one of the things I've noticed with some of these individuals that you talk to, it's like it's never good. It's always bad. Everything is bad, and there's no solutions. And it doesn't matter what's going on. It's all negative. And Nicholas is not like that. Nicholas is not like that at all. At all. And if anyone would have an excuse to do that, it would be him. And so for me, he's a very inspiring individual. And I'm glad to have you in here as a moderator, Nick. And I'm glad to see you're out having fun. That's good. He's a good example. In fact, there are times of refreshing. I've talked about that for target individuals, and you got to take what you can get. And they want you to anticipate things to go badly, right? Because they are. It's like, I don't even want to try. I don't want to do anything because they're just going to ruin it. Well, of course they're going to try and do that. And sometimes you do have to back off a little bit. I've done that before too. When they come in hot and heavy, the problem is now you're trying to control things. And that's hard to do because you can't control someone else. And you can't stop them from doing what they're going to do. And so, they want you to play whack-a-mole and it's just, I got to fix this. I got to fix this. I got to fix it. I got to get my life. And just back off a little bit and just let them do what they're going to do and then just reemerge, because really they want a reaction. And one of the reactions is, of course, they don't want you to try anymore. They don't want you to have any hope. They don't want you to have any positive thoughts in your mind about your future or anything like that, because that's how they control you, right? I don't want to go get another job. They're just going to harass me. Well, maybe they will. They're probably going to. But maybe you can just, rise above all that whole thing. Maybe not. Maybe you'll have to move. Maybe you'll have to do something, but just keep trying. Keep doing it. Keep moving forward. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. And rather than focus on controlling them, try to focus on making your environment safe and just moving forward within little increments that you have control over, rather than to get dysregulated and to focus on things to the point where you get like that mind blast to where it's like you can't even think anymore. You don't even know what to do. You're just like paralyzed. And I've had that happen to me, and it sucks. But you got to snap out of it and realize that because they are the aggressor, and I've talked about that before. They are breaking all the laws of the universe, and they are holding a lot of culpability, which of course goes into some of the other things I've mentioned before when it comes to the motives of gang stalking. and they get everybody's hands dirty. The spiritual handlers, the government handlers, they get people involved in this stuff, and ultimately they're going to be condemned for that. No one's getting away with this, guys. It just looks like it. That's the illusion. There's a lot of illusions out there, right? The whole city is after me. Probably not. If you're dealing with a spiritual scenario, different people can be activated and so on and so forth, but you have to not react. If you're dealing with a government thing, they might be gaslighting you. They're just following you around and chasing you around from store to store, or setting things up for you to have the proposition in your mind that everybody knows. They're all talking about you. Everybody is watching you. The Truman Show delusion, the crescendo effect of that environmental tyranny to a propositional delusion, right? And it's you wonder. And it's not uncommon for targeted individuals to start wondering what's even real, because your environment is filled with tyranny and it's toxic. But you have to realize that you've already won this. You have a lot more power than you realize. The fact that you're not the aggressor gives you a huge advantage. Let them spend the money. Let them spend their time. Let them waste their time. They should be out doing anything but this, wasting their God-given resources and time to play games with you. But if they don't get anything, it's a waste. They don't like that. They like you to freak out. They like you to get paranoid. They like you to get worried. They like you to get anxious. They like you to confront them. They like to call you out and trigger you. Sometimes targets deal with minimization. The infiltrators, well, are you sure that's what's going on? I've talked about that before. You're feeling frustrated, or you're dealing with something, and then you confide in someone who has gained your trust or projected to you that they can be trusted, and then they start kind of messing with your head. You sure about that? Maybe you're just kind of being paranoid or whatever, and you're okay. Maybe you're right. Just agree with them. Yeah, take it as an out. Sometimes we stagnate in our own little conversations. I've done it. Maybe I shouldn't even talk about this. Maybe I should think about something positive. Maybe I shouldn't even tell anybody what's going on and just see what happens. And that gives you authority, right? Why? Because you're not reacting. You're not playing into the whole thing. You're not giving the handlers what they want. You're not, fixated on this mental, cacophony of negativity. They want it. And when you break away from that whole thing, it's very, very disruptive to what they're trying to accomplish in your life. And I think that's probably why Nicholas was attacked so heavily. He said he got to the point where he was attacked, and then he just said, I'm not even going to listen anymore. And he takes off to just go do what he knows he needs to do. And they have lost leverage. And, sometimes, the stalkers will do that. They know that they can't psychologically manipulate you anymore. And they just come in and start beating the hell out of you with something. A lot of targets talk about that. They deal with directed energy weapons, or V2K, or fuming, or whatever it is, poisoning, break-ins, stuff like that. It's horrifying, because the thing is they want to control you psychologically. They'll do those things to get in there, to get in your brain, traumatize you, and invade your mind with that mind virus, right, of traumatized infiltration. Because now, they're taking up real estate within your thought life, within, the framework of how you're processing information and everything else. And they want that. And, getting back to the point, if you're a new target and you're experiencing these things, you think that you are a targeted individual, or people have been following you, or you've been experiencing strange occurrences, maybe even directed conversations where people seem to know your personal business. And it's not just you reading into it. They're aggressive. They are, making sure that you're hearing them. They're following you around, or treating you differently. A lot of targets will talk about their friends treating them differently suddenly, or their family, or maybe their coworkers. And of course, there are going to be things that go along with that change in stimuli to invade your thinking, right? They are doing it without your permission. That's the science of gang stalking. Of course, the plausible deniability comes out later when after you've been attacked so many times that they can just come up and trigger you. And that's the mental framework and the reprogramming that come out again. So I'm going to go back into the comments and see what's going on out there now. R&R, welcome to the live stream. And David Dotson says generational curses. Interesting. That's it. That's an interesting question. We're going to talk about that real quick. A lot of times targets will deal with spiritual issues, and I've wondered that too. I thought, my gosh, man, is this a curse? Why? Why are these things happening, and why is God allowing it? And of course, I've talked about that before, that God is not ordaining everything. The spiritual and physical beings are making free will decisions according to the possibilities and impossibilities of the created order, right? God's not a Machiavellian control freak. He's not controlling what they do. He's not controlling what you do. He suggests things, and sometimes he does intervene. Concerning the curses, a lot of people will talk about that when you get into the deliverance ministries and other areas where people will talk about generational curses, and you'll see things in families and lineages and so on and so forth, or even geographical areas. And it seems to be undeniable evidence that something is going on there, right? Why is it that a particular group of people or family are experiencing something that seems to be very similar through the generations? Well, I'll tell you why. Okay, but first you have to understand the legal framework of both the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. Okay, under the law of the Old Covenant before Christ was crucified, there were sacrifices, but there were things that didn't have a sacrifice: adultery, murder, maybe not keeping the Sabbath, so on and so forth. And what would happen? You'd have to be put to death, right? That's why Jesus said, "My yoke is easy, my burden is light." Right? You're dealing with a high priest now. Okay. And it's very important to understand that the Old Covenant, there you didn't have that option. Okay. And, people might reference the whole thing with David and Bathsheba, where his son died instead of him. Well, it wasn't that God was being partial or just letting David get away with something. That was an illustration of Jesus, right? Because Christ came out of the lineage of David. And so for the son of David to die for the adultery and the murder of David was a picture of Christ and the hope for everyone, you, me, everyone else, to escape the curse of the law, right? Very important to realize that. So we are not, there is no more third and fourth generation or generational curses. Okay, that's Old Covenant. However, there is a legal framework out there, and I've talked about this before. It's like the stuff that they get people to do to you. They have to ask God for forgiveness of that stuff. If they don't, they're owned. They are owned by them. And until they make reconciliation with the high priest, Christ, you're in Christ, you're not under the law. You have to be in Christ, not to be under the law. If you're not in Christ, you are under the law. Okay, the law is still there. However, you can be free in Christ, right? And so if you are a believer and you are still being gang stalked, what does that mean? You're not under a generational curse. Now, as far as the stuff that happens within lineages and families and maybe even different religions, stuff like that, or maybe even geographical territories, like Asia has been locked down for a long time. Well, they have things that infiltrate through that legal framework within their society, within their family or whatever. And what happens? They get in there and they create strongholds. It might be propositional. It might be, a religious thing. It might be a cult. It might be something else where they don't believe in Christianity. They believe in something else, but it seems to perpetuate through generations. They might have problems with different addictions or other things. Why? Because those demons are in there and they're taking advantage of that legal framework, the geographical takeover, which is kind of really what's happened in some of the churches out there. A lot of people will talk about being gang stalked in church. Well, how does that work? Because they've taken over. They've taken over the doctrines. They've taken over the individual, and the people are, basically doing it for money, or they are under a propositional tyranny and they don't have the truth, and the darkness comes in and then the light gets pushed out. But there is no generational curses now, right? You can be free in Christ, but there could be strongholds, right? There could be a legal framework involved in that. A lot of people get confused about that. So when people say you need to be freed from a generational curse, you need to be free in Christ from every curse, right? That's what you need. And so the generational curses and so on and so forth, that legal framework can be canceled out through him. Otherwise, it wouldn't really matter. You're still under the tyranny of the world, the flesh, and the devil. It wouldn't matter. And that's an interesting question, David. Thank you for that. And we're moving on along here. Oh, Steve Wells, welcome to the live stream. Haven't heard from you in a while. Hopefully things are going well. Okay. Barry Stevens, welcome to the live stream. And Barry says, they run me off the road and surround me with heavy equipment. The entire gym is feds. Interesting. Sounds like some pretty intense environmental tyranny. Bonnie Stratton, welcome to the live stream. Targeted One, welcome to the live stream. Okay, I'm just looking through here. Okay, we got some pretty interesting stuff out there. And I think everybody out there is pretty consistent with their symptoms and the sequelae of what they're dealing with in their environment. Is that tyranny is very, very intense, and of course, it is permeated every area of their life. Usually, depending on what kind of target you are, not everybody deals with the same thing, but that is very common for targets to deal with it in every area. And of course, like I said before, they want that emotional manipulation and you to have a proposition in your mind that is not true, right? They want you to think that people are reading all your thoughts, that all these people are watching you all the time. You can't go to the bathroom. You can't take a shower. You can't cook dinner. You can't do anything without being scrutinized, because they want you to scrutinize yourself. They want you to destroy yourself, and eventually. And that's, when targets, like I talked about, Nicholas, start breaking away from that whole thing, that's when you see a lot of victory. And it's not that if you can't do that you're not in victory. It's just that you're just in that place where you have to wait. You're in a transition to where, and it happens. I mean, targets go through that where they get attacked so heavily that you kind of got a rabbit hole for a while and just kind of try to hang on, and that's okay. But it's going to change. And like I said, they do that for a reason. It's like some of the attacks that happen to target individuals when they go on the run or whatever. People talk about the 2-week vacation, they move and then it happens again, or they just get hunted down and it's ruthless. They can't do anything. It seems like it's just everywhere. And, running is not necessarily what you need to do. Sometimes you have to. Okay, I get it. Sometimes that happens. But of course, as a target progresses through the menagerie of gang stalking, you realize that this is going to happen somewhere else. You're just basically wasting your money. You're wasting money and time. Steve Wells is a pretty a good example of someone who deals with this in a very productive way. Truck driving, so you're on the move. There's a lot of people out there that do that. Some guys, and girls become nomads or whatever. Maybe that's good. Maybe it's not. Depends on what you're dealing with. But I've met other people who do that too. They are working on the road. I did that. It was back. In fact, that was when it was real interesting, because you don't know exactly what you're dealing with until you do kind of go out and experiment with that whole thing and travel around. And you're like, this stuff is everywhere. It just depends on who you are. And it depends on how you're processing information. You don't want to be reading into these things. But I experienced that. I went out and I worked on the road. I went and traveled out on the West Coast, hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away from where I lived. And I ran into it and I was like, oh my gosh, you really can't get away from this stuff. This is really creepy. And so a lot of guys like Steve will experience that. I've met other truckers that have dealt with that. They travel all over the place. But the thing that I've heard from them is that it does seem to help. It does seem to help because they can't really form a beachhead against the guy or girl or whatever, whoever you are, because you're on the move. And sometimes you have to bunker down, though. Sometimes it's the best thing to do is to find a safe place and just kind of bunker in. But some people do the traveling thing, and it's interesting to see because you really see the magnitude of what you deal with as a target experiencing higher forms of harassment. Okay. Okay. And Perthal 8 says targets in isolation are pretty much screwed at night at night, especially when you have to get up and go to work in the morning. And that's interesting because I've talked about that before. That individuals who deal, with this type of environmental tyranny, they break you down in a lot of different ways: noise campaigns, different forms of harassment, sabotaging you at work or whatever. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I mean, there are things that you have to accomplish. Sorry, I'm cooking dinner and I'm trying to take care of some chores around here. But even when people are living in apartments and so on and so forth, they try to go to bed at night and then they get harassed or whatever. The best thing to do is just ignore it. And I've stayed awake for days before. Sometimes you have to do that, but they do involve themselves within your schedule and they try to throw that whole thing off. It's very important that you don't let them do that. Because they want you financially destitute, they want you emotionally destitute, they want you in a place where you're worn out and broken down, experiencing deprivation and demoralization eventually. That's a good point. Okay. All righty then. Okay. All righty. Well, anybody have any specific questions out there? We talked about the generational curses. I'm not seeing any other questions specifically. I think somebody mentioned something to do with artificial intelligent uh, type of directed energy weapons, but I really don't know how to answer that question. So I'm just going to kind of. And some of these things are speculative. We don't know. And there are other targets who talk about using stun guns or maybe shaving your head and stuff like that. I don't think that's a good idea personally. I think drawing near to the Lord and trying to organize your life and simplify your existence and just kind of move forward and live an upright life and try to be a citizen is really your best strategy, right? Running around trying to trick supercomputers and instead of going to wherever and getting a hamburger, you go the other direction and get a gut bomb from the. You're not you're not in a fight with a supercomputer. I don't think. I think sometimes that stuff can happen. I mean, they do have very intelligent artificial, you know, I know computers and stuff like that out there that can do these types of things. There's no doubt about it. They're working on that kind of thing, but that's just going to drive you nuts, right? That's going to work against you, and it's going to give them the authority over you because you're playing their game. You want them to play your game, right? And it doesn't mean that you might have to change your schedule. You might have to do some of those things. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But for you to run around, you know, and it's like, oh, I'm hungry for a hot dog, so I'm going to have a hamburger instead because the computer's trying to convince me. You got to, you got to move away from some of that stuff. Some of that stuff is just literally disinformation. I've talked about the lawsuits before. That stuff, they're fishing for information. If there's a lawsuit, you're not going to have to sign or apply or anything like that. It's going to be there, and it's going to be, offered by a reputable law firm, and they're not going to ask you for any money. They're going to give you money. There's a lot of things that are out there that, to me, almost look like psyops, where targets are already experiencing a lot of tyranny, and they're looking for people to give them affirmation, and they run into disinformation. And now they've shaved their head, they've modified a stun gun, they're eating things to detoxify their body that's actually harming them. You want to eat things that help you. You want, don't, just, try to be healthy. Don't buy into some of this stuff because it's part of the campaign to discredit you. And I've talked about the labeling and, putting a target at a place where they look like they're mentally ill. It just helps the whole thing out. You're all of a sudden you shave your head. You're running around talking about all these whistleblowers on, neural monitoring or whatever, which no one else is going to believe anyway. And you're bold, and you're just basically playing right into it because people are just going to use that against you. And, you should be letting them run their mouth. You should be letting them wonder what you're thinking rather than telling people what's going on, rather than giving them information like on some of the channels where they say, what triggers you? Well, you're not supposed to tell people those things. Oh, we know exactly what to do to you now, right? That's foolish. You don't want to do that. You don't want to help them. That's ridiculous. Simplify, right? Short circuit the mechanism. That's what you have to do. Well, guys, I thought I'd come on. I do have to go to work, and it's getting late. And I thought I'd come out here and discuss these things with you guys. And hopefully you're all doing well. Maybe you're in a place where you're like Nicholas. You're out for a drive or something. Enjoy it. Take what you can get. Enjoy what you can without anticipating something bad. Don't be negative. Don't let them put that toxic energy within your psyche. Don't let them do that. You want to try to be positive, and remember, they're not going to get away with this stuff. Eventually, they're going to have to deal with what they've done, and it's illegal. If you're out there as a target individual and they are gaslighting you, telling you that they have the right to do these things, or that maybe they're even trying to help you, it's a lie. There's a reason why they're hiding this stuff. It's just like some of the things that you see out there in the Christian community, where they're calling out preachers and doing these things, and then we're just trying to help people. Well, okay, but at the same time, they're being very abrasive and judgmental, and it's on a worldwide platform. That's pretty reckless, right? When people get, chastised biblically or excommunicated, how do they do it? Well, they start out where you go to someone in private. You talk to someone in private. You don't make a YouTube video in front of the whole world and start judging someone and exposing their dirty laundry, right? And then you go to them with two, and then maybe if they don't repent, then for their own good, you start rebuking them with the community. But you don't start that way. You don't gang stalk someone to help them. You're not seeing that in the Bible. In fact, when someone was excommunicated in a church setting, They were not told to harass them. And Paul even said, in the example of that individual who was having sex with his father's wife. That's in Corinthians, by the way. And Paul had to make a special letter for that this individual had to be handed over to Satan, that his flesh might be destroyed. Is that talking about someone who has to be killed? No, that's someone who's being excommunicated, and they're out there experiencing chastisement. But Paul says that they should renew their love for that individual and let them know that they are still on their side, lest they become vexed and overwhelmed and overcome with sorrow, for we are not unaware of the enemy's methodologies, right? This is not something that you do to someone if you care about them. A lot of target individuals will experience that type of gaslighting because they just don't know what else to do, especially the resilient targets. Don't believe it. The environmental tyranny is there to emotionally manipulate you for propositional tyranny and emotional currency. Do not give in to their methodology. I'd like to thank everybody for coming in here. I'd like to thank our moderators. I'd like to thank everyone who helps support me in the channel. The link is in the description. God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.